Transparency International Global Mining Program is a program that shines a spotlight on corruption risk in the licensing process in 20 countries. The program in itself takes a multi-stakeholder approach, and that means that it brings on board government, businesses, civil societies, and communities to share ideas about how best they can address corruption risk issue in licensing process. The program in itself is sponsored by the BHP Foundation and the Australian government. Given the important role that mining play in economies across the globe and the recent transition from non-renewable energy to more of a renewable energy, there is the need for mining to be done responsibly, respect human rights, and also ensure that environmental risks are minimized to the benefit of communities. One other reason why the licensing phase is so important is that it is the phase which is most prone to corruption, because at that point, actors with high stakes get interaction with government. So we believe that when we're able to solve the problem from the root, it tends to have a benefit on the subsequent phases, such as the regulation, community-company relationship, and also taxes and royalty collection. There's been the call for a fairer and more kind of cleaner and transparent licensing process, and that is why we are focusing on the licensing phase. The Mining Awards Corruption Risk Assessment Tool, as we call it, the MACRA tool, is a tool that helps to pinpoint the weaknesses in the licensing process. The tool has been tested in 20 countries, and it has involved experts from government, businesses, communities, and civil societies. The tool in itself has 80 common corruption risks, and the 80 common corruption risks help users to identify and also assess corruption in their respective countries. The tool is available on the Transparency International's website. In 2020, the tool is going to capture the gender dimension so that we can identify gender-related vulnerabilities within licensing process. Yeah, the tool has been applied across continent, Africa, Asia, Australia, Canada. And one interesting thing is that even in mature mining jurisdictions such as the Canadian and that of the Australian context, there were vulnerabilities in the licensing process. I'll mention three key red flags that we've kind of found. One is the no background checks on applicant. The reason why that is a key problem is that it kind of offers the people with questionable background and even with political affiliation to still gain lucrative mining rights, which at the end of the day affect economy and also the community. Second is the issue of the revolving doors, where people move from government to join lobby groups, and they use their political influence to change regulation, change policies to their own interests at the expense of communities. The last has to do with community consultation, which is usually not properly done. Here, they focus more on licensed applicants or actors usually focus on local elites rather than considering the interests of community at large.
In Mexico, we found that the register of mining concessions is not publicly available and it is not up to date. This may increase the level of uncertainty for companies to know the status of their submissions for concessions, and we believe that this is a vulnerability that we have to take care on. Well, without accurate information, companies cannot see if they are taken or not. Sometimes companies have told us that governmental authorities have requested for some briberies in order to report them the status, or if they don't receive any support or help, they could lose the information or also the complete application. That gaps of information also undermines communities and civil society. People don't really know if the place where they live are in a negotiation or also for a solicitude of a concession mining.
it can be used in the oil and gas sector. It needs to be adapted a little bit. One thing is that macro tool in its usage is sensitive to the characteristics of the sector. So when we are applying it in the oil and gas sector, we need to be particular about the features of the sector. For example, in the oil and gas, we all know that the oil and gas is usually state-owned, company-driven. In terms of contracting, it is done by auction and bidding. It also usually operates offshore, which means that we need to be mindful of the environment. So understanding all these nitty-gritties of such a sector will also help you to know which of the corruption risk identified in the MACRA is relevant in that sector, and then you can be applying the MACRA in the right context. On this note, I would just encourage my listeners to also jump onto the TI website and just have a look at how the MACRA tool have been used and how best that can be applied in other contexts as well.